Many of my clients come up to me and they say, well, we want to have a failure culture. And I say, what are you prepared to give, right? What happens if somebody makes a mistake? Well, they shouldn't make mistakes. We want a failure culture, but no mistakes, right? And one other important aspect is also feedback, right? Even board members, they all ask for feedback, but do they actually give each other feedback? They give feedback on documents or on content points, but sort of this behavioral feedback, they don't give each other feedback, no.
Can you describe a very concrete facilitation method for bringing out this kind of feedback?
I'll make it as a coach, light the spark inside, empower every soul to turn the tide. I'll make it as a coach, help others grow, changing lives with every story I know.
What makes a high-performing team? What helps them navigate rapid change? 12 years ago at Google, they studied these questions and looked at more than 180 different teams and potential factors. What made the single biggest difference was psychological safety. Being able to feel safe in a group, ask stupid questions, and disagree without feeling threatened. My guest today, Nils Cornelissen, helps top executive teams to achieve this level of vulnerability in their conversations. And on this episode, Nils shares why he leaves a stain on the white tablecloth on purpose, why he wants to be seen as imperfect by his clients, and how he facilitates team feedback with the keep consider method, as well as the laser feedback exercise. So if you're working with teams, there'll be lots of methods to adapt to your own coaching and facilitation practice, no matter if it's in business or with the team of a children daycare center. So let's hop right into their boardroom together with Nils. Okay, Nils. So our last session, we spent a lot of time preparing ourselves, digging into the exercises that you do for yourself to manage your state as a coach, as a consultant, to be ready for these conversations. And on today's episode, I would like to basically enter the boardroom. So you've done your state management, you are above the line and ready for difficult conversations. And in order to set the scene a bit, I would like to ask you to show us a bit around into the boardroom. Like maybe you can come up with a scenario of the corporate, what sort of change process they are in, and then take us a bit into the characters you find in this boardroom.
So let's assume a typical boardroom. And first of all, I prefer not to work in the boardroom with the team coaching, but I prefer to have people offsite. But normally these people meet once a week for half a day or a day in the board meeting. And I still remember a telco company, not German, but one European telco company I used to work for. And there is a top potential of the organization. He told me going to the boardroom feels like being beaten up and then spit out again. So this is 15, 20 years ago. Most of the boardrooms are nowadays a bit more, let's say, civilized, but still it's a daunting setup, right? I mean, there's usually the CEO, right? Often very smart, often visionary, often having a sense for the different people. There is usually the CFO, the financial person, usually very, very smart, very rational. And he sometimes has something controlling about himself, very numbers driven. So he can be sometimes skeptical about something like a team coaching. Ideally, there is a CHRO, so the people person in the room. Traditionally, in German, right, we have the Arbeitnehmervertreter as well. So there is workers' union, right? There is a whole idea about it. Nowadays, many are very pro-management and pro-people. So they try to bring business and people aspects together. They can be, with our processes, they can be our strongest allies because they think what we are doing is very important and relevant. But they are also sometimes scared about me or my company or our work coming in because it's in some ways it's their work, right? Work that they're supposed to be doing or wanting to be doing. And so it's very important that we also align with them beforehand. And then there can be COOs, CTOs, CMOs in some companies, marketing, right? There can be sales officers, chief sales officers. There can be people from different regions. Compliance can be a topic. But usually it's 3 to 5 or 6 people that I'm doing a team coaching with. Can you imagine such a room?
Very vividly. And we can picture it in the boardroom, but it can also actually be a nice seminar room, maybe at your preferred offsite seminar hotel. Yeah, so we have these different characters, slightly different interests, for sure, very different personalities. How is the mood as you enter that space?
Always very different. And I'm trying to look at it always in these 3 levels that I already mentioned, right? There is the individual level. So there are some individual processes going on for each one of them, right? For example, one team coaching I was doing, there was one person who already knew they wouldn't be on the job anymore in a week's time, but it wasn't public yet, so he couldn't tell anybody. So there is individual processes going on. Or I once had a person whose wife just split up with him, right? I mean, we are all on individual journeys, business-wise and personal-wise. In addition to the individual journeys, there is a group dynamics, right? In such teams, most of the people in the room, whether they're male or female, are very competitive, are very alpha animals. They try to be strong, they try to be in control, they have everything under control. One of my first tasks is to open up the space, creating some form of vulnerability, some form of psychological safety. Do you know this research from Google, Aristotle, Project Aristotle? They had a look at what is the one defining factor of successful teams. And they looked at, is it male, female, young, old, content-driven, functional or not? Or they checked all the different numbers. And the one defining factor that looked at what makes successful teams successful is the vulnerability in the team or the psychological safety. And basically what it means is, am I allowed to say something that is non-socially desirable? So would I open up to you and say, oh, I'm feeling not good here, or I'm feeling I've got a weakness here, or I don't feel good about that?
Am I allowed to ask stupid questions, or am I allowed to disagree with you without you feeling threatened? These sort of
Exactly.
things.
And as you say, the stupid questions, again and again, very successful, very smart people, and we're having this conversation or we're having a workshop and somebody says something and I don't understand it, and then I look around in the room and they just continue the conversation, and then I say stop, and I said, can somebody tell me what X just said? And everybody first looks around, and then because I'm smiling, right, eventually they start laughing as well, and they said, no, we can't. And it's amazing, but they didn't dare to ask the question, the stupid question of what does it actually mean? Nobody wants to be the stupid one who didn't understand X. And it's amazing. And of course, as an external coach, I'm getting myself the mandate from the start and saying, is it okay if I ask you stupid questions at the beginning of the team coaching? And then I can play a little bit with this role. And one of the first exercises I did is what we described in our last podcast, right? It was talking about reactive and creative. So having conversations, where am I in a curious state, in a productive, curious state, and where am I actually in a fearful state or in a closed or defensive state? And them having and becoming normal about we are not always perfect, but we all get to this kind of non-creative state, a reactive state dozens of times a day, opens up a conversation that is more honest than what we had before.
You mentioned that if you can be the guy asking the stupid questions, and that kind of reminds me to maybe circle back, or like looking actually at the beginning of this process in the quote unquote boardroom. How do you do that? This sort of contracting, partnering, who can I be for you with the group?
Usually what happens before the day, usually there is some form of workshop day, but it's part of a whole architectural journey. And normally I'm having one-on-one conversations with each of them to build rapport and to already understand where they stand with regards to the team. The other bit is there must be some person in this room who has contracted me, right? Often it's a CEO, it can be the CHRO, it can be two of them. And I am having a conversation of what is a realistic outcome of this process over time, and also what are they prepared to give. We talked in the earlier podcast, we talked also about what am I going to change, even though I'm doing everything perfect. And in this whole journey, when we then have this team coaching workshop, usually it's not me who provides the outcome, because again, something we talked about in our earlier podcast. So if you haven't listened to it, you definitely have to now. It's about where is the responsibility. I'm very careful to, yes, I do feel co-responsible that something helpful comes out of this process. So I'm not a full systemic coach who says this is not my thing and it's always theirs. I do feel a certain co-ownership. And yet it's very important part of my work to leave it with them, to leave the main responsibility with my clients. So it's not me saying you want to get this out of the workshop, but it's me helping, for example, the CEO prepare his individual intro speech at the beginning, where he says, oh, this is what I want to change. This is what I want to achieve with this team coaching over time. And that is very important. And I am also not perfect, and I also want to change. And I'm very curious to learn from you what I can do better. If he or she says something like this at the beginning, it also creates vulnerability, openness, curiosity, etc.
I see. Thanks. So then let's go back to the aspect of psychological safety and establishing that not only between you and them, that you said you have done already in this process of talking to them individually, but also amongst each other. How does that look like? How do you get people to talk honestly with each other?
We could talk a full podcast about it, but to give you some concrete tools that help me a lot to make it happen, even though it's not for me something that is achieved, it's an ongoing journey. It's a dance, right? It's a full dance, because in coaching, we sometimes use these terms of building a rapport, building the relationship, and leading the conversation. And as in any coaching, it's also with me in a group or a team setting. It's a dance for me between building rapport and acknowledging them in their current state, also validating their maybe not so nice emotions. Oh, I'm hearing you are frustrated. I can understand that. That's also part of enabling something, a dialogue that is usually not happening. In a business boardroom on Monday, 12 o'clock, right? Nobody says, oh, I can hear you feel frustrated. I can understand that. It's a different. So it's creating a different language, talking about emotions and my own challenges that create psychological safety. And one part of it is me role modeling it, right? So if I'm standing there and saying, oh, I'm perfect, I have everything under control, this is how we do things, I'm not creating an openness, right? If I say, oh, I'm getting in a reactive state a dozen times a day, and I'm trying, but I'm failing also, right? It creates the opportunity that it's okay to make mistakes. It's creating a failure culture, right? Many of my clients come up to me and they say, we want to have a failure culture. And I say, what are you prepared to give, right? What happens if somebody makes a mistake? Well, they shouldn't make mistakes. We want a failure culture, but no mistakes, right? Of course, it's a paradox. You can't have that. So it's role modeling this. When I was a young consultant in my career, I once went to this lady who was supposed to teach me some good manners. And she had a French name. I think she gave it to herself. She was an interesting character. And one thing that I still remember is if you have a dinner party, it is actually quite nice of the host to take a little bit of sauce or red wine and put it on the white tablecloth at the beginning, because it frees people up, because if I already make a stain on the white tablecloth, right, it's not so bad if somebody else does it. It's counterintuitive to what most people do, right? If I look at Instagram or so, right, most people want to shine, right? They want to be perfect. They want to create a perfect set. They want to have a very white tablecloth. But they don't realize that actually creates a very sterile dinner party. Whereas if I'm not so perfect, right, I enable other people also to not be perfect. And I don't want to become too political, but I think part of why Trump has been so successful is because he is not perfect. And that makes it easier for people to connect with him. And otherwise, we always have so much ambitions and we have to perform. And you've just become a dad, right? You've got a young baby. You are a professional. You want to be a good dad. You have a partner, a wife, right? And there are all these pressures on us in our lives, right? And we always have to become perfect. And Barack Obama was perfect, right? He was getting up 4:30 in the morning every day, 1 hour of sports every day. He was a perfect husband. He was good looking. He was smart. He was a good speaker. And he was a loving dad. And he was perfect in everything. But of course, that is creating so many demands. And if then I look onto Instagram and everybody there is, or Facebook or whatever, or TikTok, I don't have TikTok, and every there is perfect, right? There's all these ambitions, I can't fulfill them. And this is something, and therefore I think it's important to let go, to create a little bit of stains on the tablecloth in the boardroom and invite people to talk about where they're not perfect. A very extreme version is to ask people, what is one aspect from last week that I'm embarrassed about? That's a very extreme example. I only do this with teams I've worked for before. But sometimes I do this, but quite often I do this getting to know exercise where I ask them, what does no one dare to ask here? And interestingly, there's stuff on the flip chart. There are questions on there. And of course, obviously, they dare to ask them, otherwise they wouldn't be on there. But it's interesting. And with that, we get to a different kind of psychological safety and to a different sense of honesty in the group, but also in the whole organization.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So what I hear is that I think the first thing that you mentioned is you're imperfect yourself. You name when you are frustrated, when you are nervous, possibly. And in that sense, you role model that imperfection, inviting them to now also share their frustration, name it, and also be imperfect, join you in the imperfection. And that creates the safe space where it's allowed to actually talk about everything that's not working and then being able to do something about it. And the second thing you said, and there I would like to probe you again, because I think it also would mean that you as a coach, as a facilitator say, I hear there's a lot of frustration in what you are saying if the CFO is upset. Is that something you would do, or how does that play?
Yes. I definitely try to mirror what I'm hearing or seeing, and I'm trying to name emotions that are there that they don't have the words or not the experience to voice in those concerns. And of course, I'm very careful, right? I'm not saying this is the way it is, but I'm saying, am I hearing, it sounds like it's really frustrating you. Yes, really, right? Or they say, no, it's not frustrating. I'm feeling more helpless. Again, also great. So I'm making an offer. I never know what is true. Or let's say, of course, I have a certain sense. I'm trying to feel inside myself. What am I feeling in that situation? And over the last 25 years in my work, I've become trusting towards my intuition of what I'm feeling might be happening with the others. And I became more courageous, let's say, in actually offering it to them, even though it's not something they would like to hear.
So there is this thing of naming is taming that you also do for the others, but you do it as offers. And then the third thing that you shared earlier would be actual prompts, like a question as, what is the question nobody dares to ask? Or today I'm really frustrated with, or these kinds of things. We actually have a nice card set that is called Speak Up. That is basically full of these sort of prompts. I should send you one.
I would love to have a look at it, because in the end, it's about having conversations, right? And even with I've seen you've got the Speak Up card set, but you also have the pictures. And even that is a way into a conversation. So basically, the idea is I'm trying to create spaces where they have more honest conversations about the less socially desirable aspects about themselves. And whether it's in small groups of threes or two of them as a pair in a reflective walk outside or them in a plenary, right? That's different. And whether I use cards or any other prompts, but the basic idea is I'm trying to create space where they have the conversations they should be having, but they often do not have. And one other important aspect is also feedback, right? Even board members, I mean, they all ask for feedback, but do they actually give each other feedback? They give feedback on documents or on content points, but this behavioral feedback, they don't give each other feedback, no.
How do you make that happen? Talking about these imperfections, naming these imperfections towards each other, can you describe a very concrete facilitation method for bringing out this kind of feedback?
There's two different parts, two very effective feedback tools that I use with many teams. One of them is called Keep Consider. Keep Consider is very simple and it's a group thing. So, for example, at the end of a jour fixe or at the end of our podcast, I could ask, now we are at the end of our podcast. What did you like about it? What do you want to keep if we do this again or meet again and do another podcast or whatever? And what is one thing you would like to keep? And what is one thing you would like to consider doing differently next time? What people sometimes do wrong is they have long conversations, right? And that's all. And people say they don't have time for feedback. This only takes 3 minutes or 5 minutes, right? I'm saying what I liked really about this podcast was us interacting, what I would like to consider doing differently next time. I want to hear more from you, Toby, but actually I'm feeling insecure whether that's actually part of this format, whatever. And then we don't argue about what I said. We just leave it there. The next person is saying, keep consider, keep consider, keep consider. And after everybody has spoken, then we can think about whether we do something with the feedback or not. So it should only take 3 to 5 minutes. At the end of once, I often say to teams who have weekly jour fixe, I say, do it once a month in your jour fixe about your collaboration over the last month. So one thing you appreciated about and we would like to keep about our collaboration, one thing we would like to consider doing differently. What's the interesting thing is, I don't know, Toby, are you a person who finds it easier to point out what could be done better, or are you a person who finds it easier to appreciate people for what they're doing well?
I'm a constant learner, but I think my natural tendency is to look at what's missing. So for me, it's easy to spot takes and point them out, both at myself and others, of course.
Basically, people are in half. One half likes to learn and get better, right? And that's correct. It's good, right? But they sometimes lose sight of the appreciation part, which is the fuel or the glue to act in the relationship to actually make the other person being able to accept the criticism, in my view. And then there are those people who find it very difficult to criticize anything, right? They can only say what is going well and we should appreciate everything, etc., etc. But there's not so many people or leaders or executives out there who find both easy. And I think we have to train it to see both. And this keep consider method, because it asks for both, is a very simple way of establishing this balance in feedback.
Yeah, super nice. It reminds me of a micro retrospective, kind of. So in retrospectives, we often ask, what do you want to continue? What do you want to stop? And here we have that sort of framed slightly differently, but I really love it. What do you want to keep? So that's the sort of continue part. And then what do you want to consider changing? And the fact that the focus is on the consider makes it also helps me to hold it lightly. You don't immediately have to take it. It's something we could consider. So, yeah.
Exactly, really cool. Because usually people, if I establish this new in a team, people find it easier to point out the appreciative part, and they are many people are a bit hesitant to point out what needs to change, and therefore we use the term consider, because it's also not the claim to truth, right? I mean, it makes it easier to just throw out an idea. Maybe next time you are standing, maybe next time I could be standing as well. It's more creative in a way, or it inspires creativity and a safe space. Yeah, and I like the term micro-retro. Maybe I'll use it next time if I may, Toby. I've never called it this way, but in many ways it is a micro-retro.
Cool. Do you have one more?
The other bit, and there's certain similarities, is for me, the key thing about feedback is yes, there's many rules for good feedback, right? And you've heard many of them talk in iMessages, have this balance between what you appreciate and what we want to criticize, have the intention to improve the other person rather than pushing out your anger towards the other person, right? And having a safe space, asking the other person whether now is a good time, etc. So there's all these rules to feedback. But for me, the main problem is not that people don't adhere to the rules. And there's these models, right? Differentiating observation versus judgment, right? So I've seen you come late 3 times. My feeling is that you don't take this seriously. Therefore, blah, blah, blah. So these are all these rules. But for me, the whole point of feedback, or the biggest problem of feedback is that it's not happen often enough. So it's simply pushing people in a fun way and in an active way to giving and receiving giving each other feedback and receiving each other feedback. And so often with teams, what I'm doing is please everybody get up, get together in pairs. If you have an uneven number of people, one person can grab a coffee. And then these pairs get a very strict sequence. And we call this a laser or flash feedback. And how this works is there's these 2 people. One person is A and the other person is B. A is the person with the longer hair, shorter hair, lighter eyes, darker eyes, bigger feet, whatever, with the birthday earlier in the year, whatever. So one person is A, the other person is B. For the next 1 minute, person A tells person B what I appreciate about you. And what I appreciate about you, there's no but in there. Then it's not appreciation. It's only appreciation. We'll come to the criticism part later on, but for 1 minute, you only tell the other person what you like. And you can pause, right? You can, if you can't think of anything, but stay in contact. It can actually be quite intimate in such a setting if we are in opposite in front of each other, or you can also do it online like we do now. Toby, what I really appreciate you is your smile, right? You seem to, it makes me easy to talk because I have the feeling that you like what you hear and you are entertained, and that gives me a good feeling. Blah, blah, blah. So this is all the good things that I like about the other people. And then 1, 2, 3, go, and then people give each other appreciative feedback. And then for the next 1 minute, A to B, same direction. A says to B, I would appreciate it even more if. Ich würde es noch mehr schätzen, wenn, in German. And the whole idea here is to offer criticism, but also to offer developmental chances. And if you're feeling unsure, you can also ask a question. How about, have you ever tried standing up more straight or having your head a bit more straight rather than to the front? Whatever it is, right? It doesn't need to be you have to, but rather be out there. If you can't think of anything, just look into each other's eyes and stay in contact. And I'm sure sooner or later something will come. Any questions about the process? 3, 2, 1, let's go. And it's something that then, so A does it to B, B to A, and then you can change. And I usually do 3 rounds in a team. So if there's 5 people, not everybody with everybody, but only 3 rounds of pairs. And then I tell them to do it by themselves the next time they meet for a workshop, and then the others have the chance to connect and give each other feedback. And it's fascinating because people need this sequence, otherwise they wouldn't give each other this feedback or receive it. And but afterwards, everybody is relieved. They usually have a slightly red face because it is very intimate, it feels. But I also feel relieved because the other person, yes, they have this and they don't like this, or they think I could improve that, but it's not as bad as I thought it would be. It's fun. It creates proximity in a team and performance at the same time. And this is in my team coachings, I'm always trying to get both together, not just the relationship part, but also I think this has a direct impact on how they work with each other on their content or technical issues.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can see this one getting much more personal than the keep consider, because Here it's not only, or it's most likely not about processes or whatever we do in the organization, but it's very personal what I appreciate about you. So it's getting very touchy-feely, which brings me to the question, in this sort of environment where you have these very rational people, Erne, you described this CFO that is usually the super intelligent, cognitively strong person. How do you get these kinds of participants on board with that sort of exercise?
The thing is, I mean, many clients, even CFOs, they see the reason that there are things happening, that there are dynamics that they don't get solved. And so often I don't have to convince them. But one little exercise I sometimes do with them, and we can share it here, is how about you fold your hands? And those people who are listening to us, it's like interlink your fingers as if you were praying. And Toby, which thumb is on top for you?
Left one.
The left one. Okay. Now I would like to take the fingers apart and put them together the other way so that the right thumb is on top. How does that feel?
Unusual.
Unusual, right? It feels strange to some people. It doesn't feel nice. Actually, for 20% of the people, it feels fine, right? So it doesn't work with everybody. But for most people, for 80% of the people, this feels strange, weird, etc. Now, what's the reason behind this? Why does one feel better than the other?
Because all my life I have folded my hands that way. And now having my fingers feel the other side is a new experience.
Exactly. It's a habit. It's simply a habit. But of course, there have been scientists who looked into, has it got something to do whether I'm right-handed or left-handed, or whether my left arm is longer than my right arm? You know that both of our arms are slightly different lengths, even though it's only micrometers or nanometers or millimeters or whatever. But they checked for this and they said, no, there's no difference between the two hands, or they haven't found one. The only reason being a habit and how it feels through the habit. And isn't it the same with the top team's behavior? How they interact with each other. So even though there is no technical, mechanical, biological difference or reason, we have habits that form certain feelings. And if you think about it, that even though you don't like feelings or that you don't think they're particularly important, sometimes this convinces people that yes, feelings do matter. And talking about feelings and having a team coaching process can actually be relevant.
Because it's also those habits that we established in our communication, in our interaction on the team, that we want to sort of question and possibly change, establish new habits.
Yes, they all have an agenda. Even the CFO has a certain agenda, right? Last year, many of my CFO clients, they needed to cut costs, right? But they say, oh, people block. They say they can't save money, etc. So they do have an agenda. They want some form of change. And for them, it's a content change. It's a technical change, right? They want people to save money. But they've also realized that the ways of how they convince people to save the money haven't worked so far, right? They couldn't convince them. So they open up to other ways of approaching this. And other ways of approaching is meaning this psychological or psychosocial dimensions and having a look at those as well. And I think that's something that is happening, and it will happen even more so. Ideally, executives would learn not only to do it in the workshop with me or with other facilitators, but also in their boardroom at home. But we have one client, a big German mobility company, and there they actually do this. They spend 45 minutes on an intensive check-in before they start their full day boardroom session now. And they talk about everything that's on their mind, and even the things that they don't like or that they find challenging. And I think that's a big start. I don't think they're there yet that they would share what they are really angry about or that they could hold each other's anger. I think that's the next level. I think society will need 10 more years to actually acknowledge also anger in such a way as vulnerability. But I think we are on a good track of getting there.
Wow. So bringing vulnerability, bringing humility to the boardrooms. If I am now an aspiring coach or a consultant and I would love to join you on that mission, what is it that you're looking for in me and how can I find you?
go to our website. We'll put it in the show notes. returnonmeaning.com, or Momentum is the name of our program. And the basic idea being have a business sense, because most of our clients that we talk to, they are high-performing chief executives or top-level executives, have a business sense, have a sense for business language, and have a people sense, and show humility and gratefulness, etc. yourself.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Toby. And you have a great day.
This is it from Nils and Return on Meaning. If you haven't listened to it yet, I can really recommend also our previous episode with Nils, where he unpacked how he prepares himself, his own state, before going into these difficult boardroom conversations. If you have already listened to that, maybe you're curious to learn more about their approach to bringing mindfulness into business. They have developed a program called Momentum, where they take leaders through a 12-week journey towards more emotional intelligence and resilience. So if you happen to be a leader or a coach within an organization, this might be interesting. If you're a coach looking for an employer, you've heard Nils, pack your business acumen and apply to join the team. Or, and this is my last call, simply adapt some of the methods and ideas shared by Nils to your own practice. If you like the episode, share it with a friend. Maybe hit subscribe on your podcast app, and tune in again in 2 weeks from now for The Impactful Coach. I'm Toby, co-founder of MetaFox, and wish you all the best on your next session.